Hi, my name is Mark Morrison. I'm here with my friend Jens Dietrich,
Hello.
and we are interviewing the composer and pianist for Syberia, The World Below.
Word below, that's interesting. But now the
World
word
Before.
World Before, sorry. But the composer is Mr. Inon Zur, and the pianist is Emily Baer. How are you both today?
Very good. I think I could speak to both of us that we're both very busy here.
Thank you so much for giving us some of your valuable time for this. Emily, you're obviously, world-class classical pianist. When did you first realize that you had this talent for the piano?
Yeah, I don't think there was like a specific moment like, oh, I love the piano. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's funny to say this, but I've been doing it for so long that I legitimately cannot remember a time where music wasn't a very big part of my life. And I would never want to trade it because I love it so much. But I started when I was really young. And we had like a little upright piano in the house that my older brother played on and my mom played. And so after my brother finished practicing, I would waddle over to the piano apparently and start like messing around on the piano. And they have videos of me like as like a 2-year-old, like doing little scales. Obviously I don't remember any of this. But yeah, it's always been something that has been a huge part of my life that I love doing and that I can't really imagine living without.
And when did it become a professional endeavor?
I think I played my first professional gig when I was like 5. So it was at a festival in Illinois called Ravinia. It's kind of like our Tanglewood. And I played a solo recital when I was 5 there because they saw me play at my music school's gala. Like they had like a gala once a year at my music school to raise money, and someone there saw me play. And then they asked me to play a solo recital at Ravinia. And then I did that. And then we got contacted by the Ellen Show. And then that's when everything started tumbling.
So let's see. What is the first thing that you're going to play for us?
I'm going to play Mozart Fantasia in D minor.
Okay, Mozart. Okay. Wow.
Man, quite a way to get discovered. Do you ever dabble in any other instruments, or is it piano all the time?
I mean, writing wise, yeah, I write for everything, every instrument, all the time, whenever you need to. I sing too, but I had like a few little experiments with flute and cello. I don't think a ukulele counts, but I do have a few ukuleles.
One reason I'm asking is because, and of course, a lot of it is synth, probably for budget reasons. But I looked you up on Spotify and I came across this Bridgerton musical that you did with Abigail Barlow, which I thought was really adorable. And I'm just kind of curious, how did that happen?
Well, it really was a small idea that came out of being a musician during the heart of the pandemic when nothing was happening and there was nothing to do and you're just kind of sitting there with your thoughts thinking about how terrible everything is. And we started this thing on social media and like it just started quickly growing. And then it became like we were writing every day on live, and the more we did it, the more we sort of fell in love with doing it. And it gave us such like a purpose during the pandemic when there was nothing going on and something to wake up and be excited to do. It was kind of crazy to watch it unfold because like we just started posting TikToks and then we started going live and like seeing how it started reaching like millions of people all over the world and seeing the creativity that it all inspired was like truly incredible.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize how big it got.
Yeah, it went viral like a bunch of times. And I think our hashtag now has like almost 300 million views, which is cool. But it was like a passion project because this was kind of like a cultural zeitgeist moment, Bridgerton, and we were like the target audience. And everyone's like, release it, please. We'll do anything. And we were getting chased by like a bunch of the labels. And we were like, all right, A, do we want to release this? B, how do we want to do it? Do we want to go through a major label? Do we want to do it on our own? What are the pros and cons of each? The cons of going through a major label is that it will take a long time. And if we do go with a label, we'd want to, get an orchestra and a cast and a bunch of people and do it properly and make it sound really amazing. But that takes time. The moment for the music living in the world was now. So we're like, let's just do it on our own. Like, this started in our living room. Let's just finish it. And obviously, Abigail and I don't exactly have the budget to hire a full orchestra. So it is 100% in the box.
And her voice.
And her voice.
It sounds really good for what it is. It's delightful.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I was very nervous to put that out in the world because I'm like, everyone's gonna be able to hear through it. It sounds so fake. Oh my God, I can't do this. And then with like the freaking Grammy nom, we just kind of submitted it as like a ha, wouldn't that be funny? What if, ha. And I was like, in my head, there's just no way that an entire album of like synth instruments is going to be even, it's just, the whole thing blew my mind. It was all just like a crazy fever dream.
This is what you call a honeymoon. Pacing around our separate rooms, running from our elaborate ruse. We do. Afternoon, please forgive me your grace. Can't even look me in the face, and now I must lie in the mess you made. The mess we made. It was your mistake. You kissed me in the face. I was prepared to take my life. I stole your fate. I stole your fate. I stole your fate. No, I stole your fate. I don't understand. And now you're forced to love a man you hate. Simon, I know you don't feel the same, but I burn for you. You burn for me. I burn for you.
Amazing. So were you playing with a symphony? You were playing with a symphony orchestra at the same time, though, when Mr. Zur discovered you, right?
We actually met through a mutual. Oh, I guess, were you at that concert in LA?
No.
You weren't at the concert. Okay. So
Noreen just kept on talking about you. It's like, gotta meet her. Our mutual friend Noreen Green, she's the conductor of the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony Orchestra. And she said like she met this amazing young and talented pianist that, it's going to be great if we could somehow collaborate. And when she said it, I already knew about Syberia. And I don't want to give too much away in terms of Syberia, although the prologue is already out there. So there's few details that we could tell. But it's discussing the main character is pretty much Emily's age, and she's amazing aspiring pianist in the era right before World War II broke. And I thought that, wow, this could be so cool if Emily could just basically be her. And that was actually 2 years before even we started thinking about recording. Emily was like 17, I think. And
I think it was like 16.
Or 16, yeah.
And I remember we were at a party at Noreen's house, and it was the first time I had met you, first time I had met you, and you're like, I know this is going to sound weird, but I have a project that I think we should both work on. I can't tell you anything about it yet. I know that there is a project that I might be calling you for sometime in the future.
And, when you get as old as I am, you know that in many, many cases, the future is coming, even though it's years away. And the moment came, and I was so thrilled because Emily was available. And I basically gave the music to my orchestrator, who orchestrated it for piano, and I sent it to Emily, and Emily came and played it to me, and her interpretation for the music was just really, really perfect. It was exactly the way I imagined, and she just did it effortlessly, and just slipped in the character. When you see the character actually on screen playing, and you hear the piano, you really think that she's playing, because Emily really felt the whole thing. It was wow. All right.
And I keep saying that it's so easy to make beautiful music sound beautiful when it's already beautiful.
Thank you. One can try, but yeah, again, you know that when you write a music, this is the first part, but then when the music is actually brought to life, when it's being performed, it's being brought to life again, because there is a person with emotions and character who is actually performing your music, and without even them trying to do, they are actually making them their own. And this is what Emily did. So her signature on the whole piano part there is very unique and very strong, and makes the whole Syberia soundtrack very, very unique.
So is this kind of like the practice in film music of recording the diegetic music before you film or edit? So is this something where you guys did the piano parts and then they could actually use those to craft the cutscenes around?
No. Okay. Well, let me go back. Yes and no.
Okay.
Because no, because I actually had to compose the whole thing to a locked picture. However, I actually came up with a theme for this character, Dana Rose, way before I composed it. And because they just told me the story, they described a young lady stepping into basically a town square full of people, and she's alone, and she sits next to the piano, and everybody is waiting, and she's putting her hands on the piano and starts playing. And little by little, it's getting bigger and bigger, and other instruments are following and joining, and it becomes like a piano concerto. That's what they told me. And then I just wrote this piece. Miraculously, this piece really, I had to do like very minimal editing to have it fit to the picture.
All the timings worked out, everything?
I mean, it was almost freaky. It was almost
That's crazy.
Not only that, but I didn't have a theme for Dana Rose. We just had theme for the main character, Kate Walker, because this theme I already developed before in previous Siberias. So basically, I thought it's so cool that you see this young lady sitting and playing the piano, and she actually plays her own music. She plays her theme.
Do you often preconceptualize the music kind of as soon as you have like a project that you might be working on? You start ruminating on it immediately?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, again, I cannot really share a lot of details because these games we're not out yet. But if we'll take, for example, Starfield, I wrote the first pieces for Starfield before knowing anything about the game. I just basically knew that this is like a space game that is all about discovery and journey and sort of like deep search. So I started writing music. And it's so funny because a year later, we adopted these cues into the game and they just work perfectly. So I sometimes working with your imagination is even stronger than working with a picture that is being given to you.
That makes sense. Mark, I don't want to hog all the interview time.
No. We can go back to Emily. Some Emily questions if you want.
We'll get back to Inon soon.
As a composer, what have you learned from working with Mr. Zur?
I mean, this was kind of like my first sort of look into the world of game scoring, which I feel like is obviously there's some overlaps and similarities to TV and film, but it's entirely different because you're kind of developing with the game. Whereas I feel like a lot of times the score is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. She just created a world. Like you hear it and you're automatically there. And I think that's so important because like that's what they want to do when they play the game is be completely immersed in like this incredible world. But I don't know, it was really lovely like getting to know Inon and starting to see his process, and from a young composer to someone who's like been in the game for so long and has seen so many different things. It's like I try to soak up as much stuff as I can and like see how he interacts with the people at the game studio and the orchestra and how he worked with me and like it just all the little things that I try to soak in. It's very cool.
Were there any standout songs from the soundtrack that you were particularly impressed by or that you enjoyed performing?
There were definitely a few. Do you have them cues too?
Yes, I have everything here.
There are a few cues that I just loved playing. Like there's this prologue one that is just beautiful, and every time I hear it, it like makes my heart like ooh. Was the most difficult and the trickiest one was that like beginning concerto thing because the tempo was like this. It was just like hard to catch everyone, especially like with all these people learning the music that second. But somehow it all came together and it worked beautifully. And like when something that's tricky just works, it feels so great. So that was very fun.
Yeah, I can add that there was some parts in, because we are some of the music is being played to gameplay and some of the music is being basically attached to a cinematic. And since I really wanted to make it like a live playing, I did not compose it to a click track. So the tempo was not really assigned. However, we had to stay locked to a picture. So Emily somehow, I don't know how she did it, memorized exactly the part that...
this beat right here is where we cut. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Somehow she just memorized it and played it exactly the way it was in the temp score. So it just, it was flowing. But you have to understand, she did not play to a click track.
That's amazing.
She played just for to her memory of how, and it was on the second. It's pretty mind-boggling.
I mean, I'm surprised that I was able to do that too. But I just practiced a lot to the bounce, the stereo refs that he sent me. So I got used to the timing that was in those recordings. And then when we did a couple takes without the click track, I just tried my best to do exactly what the phrasing was in the actual recordings. I think a few months before I did the first session with you in Budapest, I played at the Hollywood Bowl and I did this thing, which was, the Tom and Jerry cartoon, the Cat Concerto, where Jerry is running around the
Oh yeah,
piano.
that's some fast music.
Yeah, and so my now agent, but then at the time the guy who hired me to play piano on this thing, Richard Kraft, was like, I have this vision that someone would play the piano live to this cartoon. And I'm like, okay, sure. And he's like, do you know how to play the Hungarian Rhapsody? I'm like, totally. I never touched it in my life. And I'm like, I can't pass up the opportunity to play at the bowl.
Wow, Richard Kraft is your agent now?
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. Jerry Goldsmith's old agent.
16, so we've been working together for a hot second now.
Wow.
That was my first intro to playing crazy rubato tempos with no click track, because not only is the entire thing just sped up, but I had to match the note as he presses it down, and it's truly all over the place, and it was super hard, and I had to stare at the screen and do that. So I think having that practice really helped me accidentally with the Syberia rubato.
I'm always, whenever I see footage of them doing Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry stuff live, I'm always jealous I'm not there. Those concerts just seem like something else.
It's so fun. I also it's the bowl. How do you not love it?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
What are your favorite classical, or it sounds like you do film music. So what's your favorite stuff that you've played?
That I've played?
Mm-hmm. Just in a concert setting.
I'll always love playing Rhapsody in Blue. I know that's a popular opinion amongst the classical folks, but I love playing that piece and also fucking around with it. And adding different things here and there. I remember the last time I played Rhapsody in Blue was 4th of July in Chicago. And I added a bunch of random nods to different American themes, and it was really fun. And then the last concerto that I played, I will always love. It was the Grieg Piano Concerto.
So do you play video games? Did you already have a background in this stuff beforehand?
I don't, but I did get a game console so I can start playing, because I had never been introduced to video games or that video game world. So in my mind, video games were pew, 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 killing zombies and all of that stuff. But what I didn't realize is that there's a whole incredible cinematic world out there. Like the music from Syberia, the storyline. I'm like, I didn't even know these kinds of things existed. And then when I did the first session with Inon, I got really intrigued. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a whole new world out there. And so I started talking more to some other video game composer friends and started listening to these, and the scores are incredible. The graphics are insane. Like it's amazing. I want to get even more into it. It's just, I'm horrible at the gameplay, like the actual gameplay, because I'm not used to it. And it just takes a lot of practice and time.
But something like Syberia, that's a point and click adventure game, basically. Did you go back and try those out?
I actually haven't played Syberia yet.
No, but what Jens says is basically Syberia actually is a great game to start.
Absolutely.
Because especially if you play it on PC, it is really like point and play, meaning like you are basically, put your mouse where you want the character to go, and press and the character goes. There's no like crazy techniques like my sons are playing like FIFA or or other like fighting games and stuff that I see them like working the remote. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah, it's the perfect game to like sit back and pour yourself a nice drink and just relax and not worry about reflexes whatsoever.
Exactly. Well said.
My activity this week.
Point-and-click adventure games, that was my genre growing up. So Syberia, that's a great one. That's a legacy series.
It sure is. And we lost our dear friend Benoit, who is the creator for Syberia, but I'm sure that he will want us to continue after this game.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of your past work with Syberia. You started with Syberia 2, correct?
Yes, that was my first Syberia.
And how'd you get involved with that one? Because it had previous composers, which
I know
we barely find anything on.
Again, that things change. Every game is different, and we see games and movies that there is a certain composer writing, and then the next, even if it's a sequel, somebody else picks up. So I'm not exactly sure why they've chosen me instead of the previous composer. He was a fine composer, really good. It was basically brought to my attention. I used to have an agency in Montreal, which funny enough, now I also have an agency in Montreal, but a different one. And they've actually contacted her and said to her that they think that I'll be good for this project. Did not know anything about the world of Syberia before. I didn't play Syberia 1. I just didn't know anything. But in the moment that they start sending me cinematics from Syberia 2, I just almost immediately fell in love with the franchise, with the character, with the way with the story, everything. It was just so enchanted and, in many ways deeper than other games that I worked on before. Storytelling was just great, and it is a narrative game. So, yeah.
But you don't know how you came to Mr. Sokol's attention?
No, they've reached out to me. I have no idea why.
Okay, you never talked to them about it.
And we never really discussed it.
Interesting.
Like, all right, you want me to do it? I'll do it.
Did you listen to the previous score and carry any of the musical identity over, any of the motifs?
I did listen to the previous score, but they've asked me to actually start fresh with thematic material, but actually carry on the orchestral style. And this is what I did. So I actually wrote my own themes. And but if you'll listen to Syberia 1's music and then you'll play Syberia 2, they're not that different. I think that the big departure comes in Syberia 3, actually.
With more of a focus on the yokels.
Well, I see your subject.
Did you look at different kind of folk traditions for inspiration with that?
So I've discovered, actually, when I was in Paris, and talking to Benoit and to the producers of the game, we were looking for like ethnic element that is not going to be identified with a certain country or region. And we've discovered the throat singing style is very common actually here by Native American tribes, but also in Peru. And you know what? Guess what? Also in the Himalayas. So we don't know exactly why. It was like, why? This group is doing throat singing, this group, and we're talking about thousands of miles between these regions, and still the style is the same. And it's like, wow, this is the perfect solution. We'll do throat singing, and this is going to be something that is going to be ethnic, but you cannot really identify it as some a very specific, ethnicity. And it became right away the U-call sound.
And you really didn't find it, even like in the style of throat singing between these cultures? That's fascinating.
It is. And we actually, I remember, so we're sitting there, Stefan and Benoit and myself and other of like the producers, and we're going on YouTube and we're starting to, we just put throat singing, and immediately we get like throat singing from the Himalayas, throat singing, from tribes in, the what now is the United States, and like, how does it possible? And it sounds very, very, very similar, which is like, wow, not maybe aliens, were like, taught all these people the same technique, but very, very weird. And by the way, it is almost the only technique that so many different tribes from different regions in the whole world are actually sharing. Very, very interesting.
Now, with this new one, which classical period are you kind of? I mean, I know it's the 40s, but that's still very much romantic period in terms of influence.
So yeah, the 40s and 50s is Schoenberg and Alban Berg. Okay. So I didn't want to write a dodecaphonic music or 12-tone music and stuff like Pierre Boulez would write, although these guys already composed. So I thought to myself, all right, so the people in the 40s and the 50s, what would they like to hear? And I was driven right away to the Romantic era, which happened like 40 years before. So we're talking Chopin, we're talking Debussy, we're talking Eric Satie, we're talking, in many cases, Rachmaninoff, actually. I took some notes from him as well. And other composers that really lived in the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century.
How much time do you generally have to compose one of these? Like, what's the... And I know you said you start like long before the production process really happens, but like once you're actually in it and, writing.
So the game, many of the game developers like to bring me very, very, very early in the stage. So for example, on Fallout 4, I started working in 2012. It was out in 2016. And usually like the Bethesda titles, but not only, they take at least 4 to 5 years. Not to develop the game. Sometimes to develop the game takes like 10 years. But when the music starts playing a role in the game. This is about 4 to 5 years before. And the idea behind it is, at this stage, the game already has sort of like, it's sort of like it's already thought after and thought out, and they know what is it. However, the artists did not really accomplish the way the game is going to be, to look. So the artist and me, we are actually growing together, and I'm developing the style of the music, and they developed the style of the, of the art. I look at their concept art. They are listening to my concept music, and together it's sort of like merging every time. And it's very interesting technique, but it just had been proven to really work well.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how jealous film composers are of how much time you have in the video game space. I think of like people having to score a film in a month or less.
Yeah, I've been in this movie also, because I composed. I started in TV, so I had my share of the agony. In fact, when I wrote music I wrote hundreds of TV episodes for Power Rangers, and you name it.
I had a question or two about that, but I was told not to ask.
But the thing is, like, I had to compose up to sometimes 8 or 10 minutes a day of music a day, because we had to.
It's a music day.
I'm telling you, because we had to complete 2 whole episodes every week. So that's like 40 minutes of music, because Power Rangers, Beetleborgs, all these kids show, it's wall-to-wall music. So we were just like, I was like a scoring machine.
That must have been a like amazing kind of training ground or like boot camp for your career.
Exactly. I call it my basic training. And don't forget that I went for a very, very thorough and harsh basic training in the Israeli army.
Right,
so
it's mandatory.
I know what basic training is. And until today, it's a little hard for me to decide which was harder.
See, I left Germany for America just before they drafted me, so I dodged it.
I'm scoring my first feature film for now, which is very exciting, but I have like a quota of the amount of minutes that I need to write a day in order to get everything done by the date that I want to get it done, yada, yada, yada. But 8 minutes? 10 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, you hear those stories. You hear about like, Jerry Goldsmith wrote The Hijacking in a night and these kind of things. But like every day, that's insane. That's an insane schedule to do for like, months at a time.
And the thing is, like, this was like a factory. So my shift, and it was a shift because I was an in-house composer. So my shift started at 6:30 in the morning, ended at 4:30 in the afternoon. And basically in this shift, I had to produce these like 7, 8, 9 minutes, whatever. And then right after me came another composer who wrote for a different show, like Digimon and other shows. The smoke that came out.
I'm like tired just thinking about that.
Yeah, well, and doing it for 5 to 6 years.
No.
Yeah, you worked on like 3 or 4 of this Power Rangers series at least.
Even 5, yeah.
I have a request, and if you can't do it, no worries. But I have a lot of minutes of music that I need to write today. So if there is anything,
actually, I don't have anything more on the list here. Mark, do you have any more questions for?
We answered
Emily?
pretty much, or we asked pretty much everything we have, or more or less, for Emily at least.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna hop off. Nice to see you.
Take care.
Bye.
Best of luck with your writing.
Thank you.
I know you've worked on, like you said, television and movies, but you've kind of more branched in. Well, you kind of solidified into video game music. Was that like a natural progression, or did it just kind of happen randomly?
I've been contacted in 1996 to write the music for a game, and immediately I actually refused to do it because
really?
Nothing. I didn't know about games, but I was really lucky that the person who asked me to do it kept on asking me. And he told me that we could record live orchestra and there is a good budget and everything. And I didn't know anything in video games. I mean, the games that I used to play are Pong. Okay.
Well, we all know that has an amazing soundtrack also.
Exactly. And seriously, when I dove into computer games composing, I really never looked back, because the beautiful thing about it that you just write a piece of music, like a classical music. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be married to a picture. So you could write a proper piece with an introduction and development and recapitulation and everything that I've learned as a kid in theory lessons. Mm-hmm. And it just really, and that's why, by the way, it's so easy to put together video game concerts, because the pieces are just in many cases concert pieces.
So I kind of see, like, I think there's kind of a divide in application where, like, on the one side you have it's a complete, almost a concert piece, and it just loops sort of thing that you have in RPGs or in, something like the old Medal of Honor games that Michael Giacchino did, that kind of thing. Those are very concerty albums. But then you also, people like Austin Winter, he talk a lot about, music systems and designing music systems and making sure that your compositions fit into them. So Bethesda obviously does that because they do a lot of splicing, right? They do a lot of recording little segments of music and layering them on top of one another, depending on how intense things get and all that sort of thing. So what's that process like, working through that stuff as a composer? Your music's got to be more malleable in how it's applied.
After so many years of writing music for computer games, I'm just not thinking about it anymore.
Interesting.
I just write music that, if you will basically break it out to stems or to instrument groups, you could create so many variations out of it. And I just got used to write this way. Yes, it's a very different way of writing for movies.
Do the music, hand it off, and they take care of all that stuff. You're not that involved. The
implementation almost always is being made in-house.
Mm-hmm. Now, the collaborative process as a director, how do they tend to communicate with you? Is there ever a temp? Is it more like a style or?
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate in the video game world that there is never a temp.
That's nice.
There is ideas. They could send us pieces for inspiration. We want it to sound like this. We want it to sound like this. We think that there is some elements in this piece that you could adopt. But overall, no, there is no temp score. And in many cases, I just get like a verbal description and not very particular or specific. So I really write out of my imagination, which is kind of cool.
Then synth mock-ups that you demo for the creative team, basically?
Exactly. And I'm creating it in a way that even if they won't have budget to record live orchestra, still it'll sound good enough. Obviously, a lot of things that I am doing are ending up being recorded.
I imagine you probably have your own sample libraries after all these years.
I have lots of sample libraries. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, Mark. No, I think I know what you're about to ask next, so please.
Well, my question, and I know this is kind of Jens's question, was how was it to conduct with COVID going on?
Did you do like a social distance orchestra or?
Yeah, well, okay. So we did 2 sessions for Syberia. One of them was on the beginning of March 2020. And this is exactly when COVID hit here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So we were like a day.
You had the cutoff.
Like a day. I came back on March 3rd and they closed the airport on March 5th or 6th.
Lucky.
Okay? And the second recording was on, I think, in October of 21, I believe. And this is where sort of like the delta went really down. Hungary, they didn't even bother to put on masks. Everybody was just like maskless. It was just like a love fest.
Yeah, you hit the sweet spots.
Exactly. And then when we came here, like a month after that, Omicron hit. So
that's nice, because I can, even the really good recordings now, I can always tell the socially distanced orchestra. There's just something about, you don't get the room sound quite.
Nope, you don't.
Yeah, you can fake it to some degree with reverb, but You've worked with both Western and Japanese developers.
That's true.
Are there any big differences in the way that they work and collaborate?
Huge difference. Western developers are more keen on touching sort of like more realistic aspects to the score and to the actual gameplay and games. By the time the Japanese are always sort of like want to create their own worlds. And so when you start working on a Japanese game, the way of thinking and the way music works for them is very, very different. I remember that the first time I've actually witnessed it is I scored a show called Escaflowne. I don't know if you've heard about the show.
I have heard it.
Yeah.
I've listened and watched what the Japanese composer did for the previous shows. And I told myself, and well, obviously I'm Westernized, okay? And it's like, it's great music, but it just really has no connection whatsoever to what's going on the screen. And for us, like they told us, if something happened, you should respond and respond right away. Their style is very different.
I don't think that Yoko Kanno wrote the picture at the time. Like, I think she just composed stuff and they needle dropped it.
Exactly. But the way they've chose what is going with which scenes, just hell were they thinking? But this is their way of thinking that later on in the years, I really learned to actually appreciate. They think in more emotional way and not so much to describe what is actually going on. So they will describe the emotions, not the actual scene. It's always more artistic and it's always more theatrical. Very, very different aspects. Today, since I am working, for many years, and I composed a very, very big Japanese title like Soul Calibur and Dragon's Dogma and stuff, I know how to sort of like adjust myself, although it still does not feel natural because I'm so American.
Right.
You're probably under NDA for a lot of future stuff, but is there anything
you can't talk
looking forward?
The only thing I want to say, because I got to run and pick up my son from school.
Oh, sure.
Is that first and foremost, and most importantly, and now in a little more serious note, I really want to thank you for taking the time and interview me. I wanted you to know that Syberia is a very, very close title and franchise to me, and this game even more because it has a lot of details that brings me back to my roots and the history of my own family. So thank you for taking the time, and then of course I want to thank all the listeners, and I really wish that they will enjoy and go through the emotional journey that we've been through when working on this title.
Well, it being a title that's focused on classical music, that is in my wheelhouse. So I'm very excited for this one. And in the meantime, I'll be listening to the album. But thank you so much again for joining us. This was an absolute delight. And also thanks to your handler for not stepping in.
And thank you. And then again, very, very good and evocative questions. So well done.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks very much.